You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here with me, and today we're going to talk about the camera gear that we use to film all of our hunts.
It's long overdue.
And adventures. We're not going to get into a lot of detail on how to use them. We're just going to kind of run down the list of what we use.
What we do use.
And just, you'll get it behind the scenes. Some of you probably just already know or have seen this stuff, but we're just going to go through it.
Yep.
Okay? So, for filming, the main workhorse we're running is the A7S3, the Sony A7S3. And we've got this little small rig cage that we got put around it with a couple little adapters for microphones and, hot shoe mounts.
Yeah, I mean, you can put handles on here if you want. Just, you can accessorize it however you want to with that cage. Makes it nice.
And the cage has actually, we ran them for years without cages. The cage is actually giving me a little more grip points.
Yep.
It's a little more stable when I run the Dana Design clip.
Yep.
And I hook it to my shoulder. And now I'm messing with the all-in magnetic clip.
Yep.
That can just also adapt to that. So the cage just helps it be more stable. And then it gives me another mounting option. So the workhorse is the A7S3. I'll get into the lenses in a minute, but our microphone setup is this janky Sony. What is it?
It's the K3M.
K3M.
Yep.
We break them every year.
They're not cheap.
$600 or $700, something like that.
But it's a hot shoe mount.
And it slides into the top here, into the hot shoe mount, so that when you turn the camera on, you don't have to turn the microphone on independently.
Yep.
And this is actually a mixer. So it'll blend. So it's got these XLR inputs right here, 1 and 2. I have just found that it's the most controllable. It's got digital analog in the back. I've got input select, and I can run 2 channels or 2 separate channels.
Yep.
I can run, even the third channel is for, the input is not an XLR input. It's just like a standard
like audio video.
1/8
Not audio video, but
in-out headphone jack kind of thing. But I like running this, and then we will run this Sony microphone that comes with the mixer. But one of the things that we quit doing was using the mount that comes on the K3M. That's how you break it.
Because it really gets broken. There's no way, especially if just a little bit of pressure on the tip of that microphone.
If you run the shotgun mic right here, and folks that are listening, you'll want to watch this. But if you put the shotgun mic inside this holder here, which is, it's there to limit sound and shock and all that. You put that in there and you close it, and you have the microphone sticking out, and then you just tap it on a stick,
like a tap,
or your shoulder or whatever, and this whole thing snaps right off.
Yep.
And the mixer breaks right at the hot shoe mount. Hey, folks. If you like the show and you want to support us, go check out the latest hats and shirts we've got on the Gritty Shop. Just go to briancall.com, click shop, and you'll find the latest stuff. My favorite shirt right now is the Some Men Can, Some Men Can't barbell tee. We also have It's Just Work. We've got a couple other designs like the Gritty Elk Sunset tee, which I really like. We got sweatshirts, we got hats. Go over there, check it out, shop. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's get back to the show. So what we did was we switched over to the small rig and put a little mount here on the side for the shotgun mic. Just got a little standard
just shock absorber
for this, and put it on there. And then we run this around into the mixer, and we've almost entirely stopped breaking the microphones.
Yep.
I set it down on its side like so. And this thing has protected it, in fact, when I've accidentally dropped it or bumped it.
Even that's the thing is when you do hit this, it still has the shock absorber, but it also
just rotates because of how we have it. And I can also point it at the person's mouth.
Yep.
Like if I'm filming a little bit down, because this shotgun mic is really directional, which is what I want.
Very directional, and it doesn't cut out in the wind. That's probably the number 2 thing.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like the K3M is because it just seems to handle the wind better than any other shotgun mic I've tested.
You'll still hear the wind, but you won't get the cutting of the voices and the sound and stuff, so it just still stays natural.
The other thing in the past, I have used just a Rode Video Mic Pro, and I've just plugged it into the microphone jack here on the side. That's a 1/8 inch or whatever.
Yep. Just audio cable.
Audio cable input, just the singular. And these things fail on me halfway through a hunt, in the middle of a hunt.
Middle of a hunt, always.
The jack does, the actual recording jack.
Or especially if there's lots of moisture, it's like a guaranteed going to fail and then cause issues. And
then I can't get this thing to play, and I'm always running my camera in the rain and the snow and in the damp and whatever, or I'm setting it down, and that microphone's sitting out port. When you have a little jack sticking out of it, and if you bump it, it breaks it like that. Now the A7S III is better, more robust on that jack than others, but I have to have that jack repaired like once every year or so.
Yeah.
So the other thing too is a lot of times when you use that jack, you have to use external power on the microphone, meaning you got to turn the power on. It takes a battery or something. And if you forget to do that,
no audio,
because I don't believe this microphone jack creates any external power.
Yeah. Right.
And so you got to have that battery separate. So when it runs through the hot shoe on the top, it comes through the mixer here, the K3M,
and it all works off of the power of your camera.
Yeah, exactly. It works off the power of your camera. It powers the microphone through the battery in the camera itself. It doesn't really use any additional power that I can tell.
Yep.
And so I like it for a lot of reasons. The other one is it's a mixer, and so it has the settings right here on the side, and I can dial like when Ryan is whispering, and I got the camera. Like I'll film his face. It'll be windy,
and he's whispering like this.
Yeah, and I'll put
the
microphone. I'll aim it kind of at his mouth, and I'll have a wide angle lens this close to his face, and that way I'm capturing clean audio on the fly. I'm not trying to do it with a lav mic and all that, which is a whole challenge in itself to have a separate mic on a person that they're not brushing or hitting and so on. This way I get nice and clean audio and I'm recording like so. But if he's whispering, I can just flip this dial real quick and I can raise up the gain on the microphone to fit the scenario I'm in the moment. Watch those meters, have them repeat something, whatever, and I'm good to go.
Yeah. And while we're still on that microphone itself and that setup, so we can actually run the shotgun mic, and then we can run our lav mics on channel 2 and have guys with lav mics, yet still also have our external shotgun mic to create and capture both audio.
Exactly. So we use this adapter that Brad has
here. Yep.
And this is simply
XLR to audio.
Yep. To the 1/8 inch audio jack here. And so I'll plug it into the XLR here. We'll plug in our little cable here, and then that'll go into
the receiver of the lav mic.
Yeah, this is the Bluetooth receiver.
So these are the Rode wireless go-tos is what we have stuck with over the last little while.
And there's options here. I have the little mounts to attach the receiver lav onto the cage.
Yep.
So I just you can put it on there how you want. So I'll basically have both the shotgun and the lav plugged in at the same time. Yep. And they're two separate channels. So if I don't want to use the lav mic audio in the edit later, I can just turn it off.
Yep. Use the shotgun mic.
And use the shotgun, or use them both at the same time, or only use the lav.
Yep.
So it's kind of a monstrosity, and everybody has a different way of doing it. I'm just telling you how I'm doing it. Pedro saw this and he's like, no way. ain't doing that. And he runs, I might try Pedro's setup too, but he's got some giant Rode mic, kind of a cheaper, like it's cheap compared to this.
Yeah.
It's definitely indestructible for outdoors, but he runs into this headphone jack on the side. You got to make sure your audio's on, not the headphone jack, the microphone jack on the port on the side. It's not an XLR mic. And what he ends up with is a splitter, and he runs a splitter off of that, and it powers his lav mic. And the Sony a7S III, I think it does split it into 2 channels. So even though he has the cable is a splitter and it goes into one right here, the internals on the camera, I do believe, split it into 2 channels. So it's not really stereo; it's just dual mono.
Yep. And
then he can choose. Oh, I only want channel 1, channel 2, or both at the same time. And it's done well for him. His audio is pretty good. So it's definitely less fragile.
Yeah, it's lighter
than this. It's a little bit lighter.
Yep.
I mean, this is light.
Yeah.
It's more bulky
exactly.
than it is weight-wise. But I do believe this audio is just that much better, especially in wind.
We just have so much control with that mixer there,
but it's got
at the ready.
It's got its downside. It will break.
Yep.
Although we haven't broke them, like I said, since we started mounting it this way to the cage.
Yep.
Now, the one thing that we got caught on this year that we somehow missed the memo on,
didn't know,
is I'm monitoring the audio constantly, and it's really hard to film an outdoor film with these kind of microphones and all that if you're not listening to the audio.
Yep.
Now, I wish, and maybe they haven't, I haven't found it yet, I wish they had like a Bluetooth invention. So just like you have the Bluetooth lav mic, which is wireless, essentially. So I'll wear a microphone on my chest. It'll transmit a wireless signal to the receiver. The receiver will go into the mixer, and it'll record the audio. Okay? I like that setup. What I also want is on the headphone jack, I want a Bluetooth that transmits what's coming through into my ears, so I don't have to have a wire.
Yep. So we always carry just a set of headphones, earbuds.
Yeah. So you'll see in some videos, I'll be wearing this cheap white earphone like this. People are like, why are you listening to music? It's like, dude. But I'm not. I'm listening to Ryan and Brad whisper and making sure that we're actually able to hear it while it's going on.
But what you're getting at is it bit us in the butt.
It did. So when you listen to this, when I ran all of this gear in analog mode over the years, whatever I'm hearing coming out of this headphone jack is what I'm going to hear when I play it on my computer at home.
Yep.
This year, what we realized was when you switch this audio mixer to digital, okay, somehow it conflicts with the internal audio recording level inside the body of the camera.
Yeah.
So you go into the menu system on the camera and you can say, hey, turn this audio on to, you can put that audio onto digital recording. What is it?
It's -1, by 0 to all the way up to like
30
or something like 25.
Volume level.
How you hear it in your headphones.
So what happened was, when you're listening to it here, if you have the digital recording level inside the camera menu system turned up really high, usually when it was analog before, it just was overridden. If you plug this mixer onto the hot shoe mount, it just, whatever was in the camera, it didn't matter. It just would override it.
Yep.
It's not using the audio recording level within the camera. When I switch it to digital on this mixer, though, what that did was somehow it blends the audio recording level in the camera digital settings with the mixer settings.
Yep.
And you ended up with something that sounded beautiful in your ears when we were out there hunting. We filmed a bunch of hunts like this. And then you came home and the audio, you could barely hear it.
Yep. So what is coming through your mic, your lavalier mic, into your receiver is a much lower sound than what is actually being output that you're listening to in the field in your ears. And so we're getting a false reading.
Yeah. When you listen to the audio with the headphones, monitoring how buttery goodness your audio is, it sounds crystal clear. But when you get home, that's not at all what was recorded.
Super low, super low.
So like Brad said, it's a false reading of what it is you're actually hearing.
So now we have it set to like basically 1 on the output that we are hearing in our ears. That way we can completely hear the control of what's coming into this lav mic.
Yeah, when he says set to 1, he's talking about the internal recording level in the Sony menu. Yep. So when you go into this and you go to audio recording level, we set it to 1.
Yep.
Everything's set to 1. All the pre-saved menus, everything we use for filming set to 1. So it's just barely recording any level at all. Basically, it's nullifying whatever the camera does, and it's doing all the control through
the mixer
microphone on the top, which is what we wanted, and which is how it worked always before. We just never had to pay attention to when we were running an analog that situation.
Right.
So one of the options is, just always run an analog. However, what we're finding is when we record digital audio files, when we get home and we use our software to process the audio in post,
it gives you so much more to work with.
Yeah, it's like raw footage. It's able to, like, especially if you get some wind or you get one person's whispering like this and
the other guy talks
really loud. The post-editing software is able to normalize a lot of that stuff and fix all that audio much more powerfully than if it was recorded in analog.
Yep.
So now we've just gone through our menus on all our cameras, and we've just set the default audio level in all our saved settings to 1 out of 30.
Yep.
And we just strictly now manage our inputs and our audio volume levels through the mixer here and the dials. And now when we listen to the audio sound coming through the headphones when we're in the field monitoring what we're getting out of the camera, it's accurate. What we're hearing here is now what we're hearing on the computer when we get home.
Yep. Now, you got to make sure, like if you're using a different camera, make sure that camera does have the digital option to record. Because some of the older cameras, most of the new ones do, but some of the older cameras, they only record analog, and it can bite you in the butt because you actually won't be recording audio if you're on digital.
I don't think it shows meters.
No, we shouldn't show the meter, so you shouldn't have the audio. You should notice right away.
So on the screen as we're recording, I have the audio meters there. That's what was so confusing is it still showed the meters and all of that, and I'm listening with these headphones, and it sounds great, but whatever's going on,
actual output was really low.
Whatever's going on when the audio recording level is turned up really high in the body of the camera through the menu system, it just completely jacks up all of our beautiful audio.
Yep.
So we have a bunch of films, 3 or 4 where we have entire days where the audio is so bad.
Yep.
And I've had to do quite a bit of work to try to salvage all of it and still tell a story. And we got there. We found a way to do it. We have a lot of post edit software tools that we use. They're kind of like trade secret stuff.
Yep.
I've worked really hard because I started out as a podcaster fixing crappy audio before I ever started filming. So I got pretty good at the audio game. And back when I started in 2015, the microphones and the recording issues were a constant issue. It's much better gear now than it was. I say for filmmaking, audio is probably far more important and much more of a workhorse. Much more of what we do is paying attention to audio than it is even filming.
Yeah, absolutely.
The video portion is like,
obviously
nowadays with the equipment,
yeah.
But the audio, I'd say most hunt films lack audio, lack good audio. I think a lot of what people like about my films is the audio quality's very good. They don't even know that that's the reason that they like the film.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think being able to stabilize it and bring it all equal is huge, where a lot of times somebody's really loud, other people are really quiet. Just stabilizing it and then making sure it's clean, good audio goes a long ways in a film.
And on that, we use these wireless
wireless go-to
microphones. And this is a lav mic. And we have the dead cat, or the, what do you call this? Like the wind. This little puffball comes with the kit when you buy the wireless Go microphones.
And they clip in there.
Well, we glued them in. I never take them off. They're glued in. They're there forever. I super glued them because they will fall off or get knocked or whatever. So we super glued them. The other thing that I've done is they have a clip in the back right here.
Yep.
And that clip only lets you clip to a certain areas. You don't get to decide necessarily exactly how you're going to put it on.
Yeah.
And it can cause some problems with brushing up against the microphone.
You got a beard or something.
One of the reasons we don't run lav cords hardly ever. A lav, what do you call it? Like microphone that because you can plug a microphone into this with a cable, run it up under your shirt or put it somewhere near your face. Or we generally don't bother with that. We all hate cords. They get caught on things.
And that's another thing you have to listen to and monitor, because like if you have a cell phone or something, that
cables.
sound hertz will affect how it is.
Anything magnetic.
Any magnetic, metal.
Your vinyl harness, anything gets near it or between the receivers,
humming.
You can get like this whining sound.
Yep.
It's a pain in the butt. So we actually just like to run this right next to the person's face.
Yep.
But what I've done is I bought these magnetic kits, and
only place I've found them is B&H Photo.
At B&H Road, you can buy these magnet kits where it's a little piece of metal here, and you can buy the magnet. Now, this setup right here is pretty decent. It does okay if you just got a thin shirt, and you can see that I just attached it to me. I can put it on anybody I want at any area, and it kind of stays good on their person without like ever messing with the mic, and I can get just reliable audio. What I'll do every 3 or 4 months is I have 2 of these kits, and I will super glue or epoxy one magnet to this metal here, because this is how the kit comes, just like this. I'll super glue this like that, or epoxy it so that this magnet is now stuck on this piece of metal. Like, it ain't coming off.
Nope.
Then I'll take...
Don't snap them together.
A second magnet like this, and I'll go magnet to magnet. Now, dude, you could lose a finger.
It makes it super strong, but if you're not paying attention and they come close together, it'll snap so hard that it will break the magnet.
They will shatter.
That's why right now they're only singles, because it shattered the
We
magnet.
shattered them. And the glue, every now and then,
Break
after
loose.
a hard, rain, cold, ice, all that kind of stuff, it'll break loose, and I'll have to do more glue or more epoxy. So, but once you go magnet to magnet, I mean, you can put it through the hat, you can put it through a shirt, you can put it anywhere you want, and they don't get knocked off. They're like real strong.
Super strong.
Much stronger than when you just go magnet to metal like this. So we super glue or epoxy that, like I said, to the metal attachment, and then we just grab the magnet from the secondary kit. And we've had these for a long time. You can lose a magnet. That's annoying. So I pack extras, because somebody might knock theirs off, and one of the things I've thought about doing is somehow attaching a tether with a string to the outside of this that pins onto a shirt. So if it does get knocked off, it has like an extra tether to keep it on. I haven't messed around with it. So far we haven't lost it. Because I thought about even just a string around the hinge there, getting it on there tight with a good string, and then tethering it on somehow. But so far, although they've knocked off and we've had to pick them up off the ground,
we haven't lost one
We haven't lost one yet. Yeah. So anyway, and it's been like 2.5 years since we've been using these. But magnet to magnet, I highly recommend. This kit without the magnet, it's really not for... It's fine for what we're doing here in studio and just out shooting bows or something. But when you get on the mountain and you're like run and gun hunting, it's not ideal.
And we have tried other lav mics too, like the DJI ones. These ones just seem to work a little better for what we do, and the wind we're dealing with and the elements that we're dealing with.
The other thing that I like to do is attach them to a tripod or to the rifle. So Ryan or Brad will be on the gun or myself, and you can just boom, and it goes right onto the scope or it goes right onto the side of the rifle. That way it's not on their body.
Yeah.
And as they're sitting there and they're whispering, I'm getting that clean audio without them laying on top of it.
The rustling. And
like sometimes they'll lay on it and they'll be prone on the ground, and you can just magnetize this to any metal thing nearby. I can stick it on a spoon in the ground right next to their face or whatever. So the magnet's just kind of my thing. I like it.
They work great. They work real good.
So this particular one is one receiver and two lavs. So we capture two people's voices are coming into a single receiver into one channel.
Yep.
We also have the Wireless Go 1 rather than the Wireless Go 2. And that is two separate receivers for two separate channels.
So it's just one receiver to one microphone. And this is one receiver to two microphones.
Yeah. In the past, when that was kind of nice because somebody's microphone might have fallen on the ground or gotten in their pocket, and I still have like one other channel. But the way that we run it here, I got two lavs going in this input, and I got the shotgun here. I always have the shotgun as a sort of a backup.
Yeah.
Just in case. And so I'm just always listening to the audio to make sure that Ryan didn't lose his mic down his shirt or Brad's not breathing on it too heavy.
A jacket rubbing on it. That's the number one
The most
thing.
annoying sound is Ryan's sniffing. like as soon as the winter hits, it's the loudest sniffing you've ever heard on the planet.
And I will say the second most
his
annoying
nose runs like
is when Brian starts to eat something and you have that.
That's normal.
Okay. I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
So I hope it kind of covers
that
covers and
the
the sound.
Camera and audio. Now we can get into kind of like the lens setup that we run for what.
Before we do that, the A7S III is not a good photo camera.
Sucks.
But it is a video king.
Yes.
120 frames, 4K, 60 frames, 4K. The dynamic range is incredible, meaning I get the best look out of, a lot of exposure issues happen when it's too bright, too dark, and those two things are together. Like, especially when it's really bright, like Mexico, and you're in the trees and it's really dark. And it's like you step out.
Super contrasty.
The A7S III is so good at dealing with that. It's also a monster when it comes to low light filming.
Yep.
So it's just so much more powerful with the ISO that I can film, late night. I can also throw filters on here. When you run at a high frame rate for slow motion, you're not letting very much light into the camera. And when it gets later in the day, stuff like that, you need a camera that's not grainy, doesn't produce grainy footage, even though the ISO is really high. Hey everybody, if you like the show and you want to support us, head on over to Mountain Ops. If you're in need of a new merino hoodie, or you want some workout clothes, or you just want a little pick-me-up. I like the Mountain Ops Ignite, especially like the pink lemonade flavor. It's a good one. I recommend that. Head on over to Mountain Ops, use the code GRIDDY. You're going to save, and it's going to help us keep bringing you the show. Thanks for tuning in. Now, let's get back to the show. There's no camera right now that's on par. That's why I use it, but it's not great for photo. It's not an all-in-one camera.
No, it's only like 12 megapixels, so it's like you're not able to like crop in on a photo and actually do much with it.
It's nothing like Brad's Sony.
So I carry the Sony A7R4, which is a photo workhorse because it's a 62 megapixel camera. And so like I can take a photo of something small and that's a ways away and I can really crop in on it. But it's okay for video. It does 4K 24, but for 60 and 120, it's all 1080. So it's not great for the video we're looking for, but it's a workhorse when it comes to photo.
Well, I've used the A7S II. I've used the A7 III. The A7 III is kind of a good blend of video and photo, and I think it's only like a $1,200 camera at this point.
It's probably cheaper than that. Another good one right now would be like the A7R4. and probably or the A7 IV, not the R4. The A7 IV is pretty good for both, and I think the new A7 V R5, I believe, is pretty good for both.
Yeah, the A7 IV, I'd look at that, or the A7 A3.
Yep.
Anyway, we're big Sony fans. So let's talk about lenses really quick.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Sony 1 to 400 millimeter lens, and I have a Sony 2 to 600 millimeter lens.
Yep.
And the weight is not much different, but the reach is double when you run this is a 2 to 6, 2 to 600, and the 1 to 4 is 1 to 400.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a little more on the far end when you run the 2 to 6 than you do with the 1 to 4.
Yep.
Right. And then you can throw a teleconverter, like a 2X or a 1.4 onto this 2 to 6. On the 1 to 4, you should really only use the 1.4 teleconverter.
Yep.
It's not really, it doesn't look good when you run the 2X teleconverter. In fact, I'm really only running the 1.4 teleconverter. I had the 2X. I have now, I just swapped it out and got two 1.4s. I think it's just crisper, cleaner. You don't quite have as much reach, but I think it's just cleaner.
Yeah, but we can do that in post.
Yeah.
Still.
So the 2 to 6, which one should you get? You can't go wrong with either one, the 1 to 4 or the 2 to 6. The 1 to 4 is less bulky and a little bit lighter.
Yep.
For backpacking, running and gunning and all of that, with a 1.4 teleconverter, you'll get a good film out of it. If you really want to punch in and have closer up footage, the 2 to 6.
Yeah, and one of the downsides to the 1 to 4 is that it is an external zoom. So you get dirt, you get moisture can potentially get inside that lens, where the 2 to 600 is an internal zoom. So there's nothing extra.
The lens doesn't shoot forward and come back.
So you have seals and stuff to deal with on that 1 to 4.
When I'm zooming in on an animal like this, if my hand isn't being seen on the 1 to 4, the barrel's moving out. So there's that wolf that I filmed like at 18 yards, I'm zooming, like the barrel moving back and forth.
Couple things, because you'll end up hearing that on the film with an external zoom, because it's like I said, it's all external.
Whoomp,
yeah,
whoomp.
and clicking in at the stop point and clicking back at the other stop point. Where with the internal zoom, you don't have that problem.
Yeah, the zoom is right here, and you don't hear it at all.
Yeah.
It also changes the weight when you have it on a tripod and you go from 100 to 400 and you kick it all the way out. As that barrel goes forward, there's more weight up front and it tilts the tripod down if you don't have a really solid head.
Yep.
And that can be annoying too. So
especially on the side of the mountain.
So I kind of like the 2 to 6, but it's you can pull the hood off. You can see how big it is right here. It's a little bit bigger. It really is, because I used the 2 to 6 recently. Again, I just went out for a day or two and just to test it. Not the 2 to 6, the 1 to 400.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I went out with the 1 to 4 recently because my go-to is the 2 to 6. And that 1 to 4 is great. It's actually a G series lens. This one isn't.
Yep.
It's a lower quality lens in theory, but when it comes to hunt film, we're not photographers here. We're not wildlife photographers. When it comes to shooting birds over ducks on a pond, as hunters, we want to see that sheep. We want to see that goat. We want to see that elk. We want to see that mule deer, that coos deer as close as we can. Up. Like the more that animal can fill the frame often, the better the video.
Yeah.
And they're an actor in the film. Why are we obsessed with going out into the mountains and hunting and then sitting and glassing for hours? And sometimes we just find a bear or an elk or whatever. We just watch it and watch it just to see it. That's a big part of a hunt film, in my opinion. People want to see the animal.
Yep.
It's like National Geographic here. It's Mutual of Omaha. Here's your chance to really see some wildlife doing wildlife things. And when it's a little dot in the screen, it just doesn't carry the same impact.
It's not near as impactful
as the zoomed in version. So we packed this with us. on those hunts.
And it is a little more work getting all that wildlife footage, but in the end, it is so worth it, as you guys can see in the films.
Now, with an all-in digiscope,
yep,
and a great spotter, and the modern phones, there's a lot of great long-range footage that can be captured in that way. And I wouldn't be surprised if down the road we're running something like that.
Yeah.
It's
at least on some hunts for sure.
Especially the ones where, we're really backpacked in. We got 10 days of food, camp, everything, and then we kill an animal, and it's all got to come out in one
So,
trip.
Just to put that in perspective, so say I'm filming a hunt for somebody and I'm the only camera guy, I usually am packing about 18 pounds of camera gear. Now, when Brian and I are together, we usually split because we will take a little bit of extra stuff. We'll end up splitting around 22 to 23 pounds of camera gear. So that puts, 12 to 13 pounds, 11 to 12 pounds on our back. But again, solo, if I'm the only camera guy, I'm about 18 pounds of camera gear.
It's a significant extra. Now, I have been toying around with the latest iPhones and then some software you can download, Filmic Pro and what is it? Cinema
P3, I think. Or
Cinema
something.
P3.
I think that's what it's
I
called.
think those are the two leading ones, and you can you can set the iPhones to record an 8-bit or 10-bit log,
S-log,
and then the controls. I kind of liked the Cinema P3 better than Filmic Pro.
Yep.
I liked the controls, the interface, all that kind of stuff. I actually like the output of the footage too a little bit more. Their log version and the color profiles. So, man, the way that you can turn those apps on the newest phones, like the Samsung or the Sony's, or the iPhones, and the way you can just get the image stabilization cinematic, like it's latent, but that's what you'd want as you're moving, getting some smooth shots. It's incredible. And then you can get a little tiny gimbal for it. You can run one on the all-in and just boom, you're filming long range with the digiscope, and the other one you're filming over here. And in log, the way it's recording, you can kind of edit that a little bit. And then they have a few lenses you can buy for the phones as well that give you a little more bokeh, a little more blur, a little more cinematic look to the film, a little wide angle, fisheye. You can buy a few things to get some cool shots. We haven't dove into it. It's definitely on the list for some of these 17-mile in backpack hunt.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell a story, and we're going to do it with a 40-power spotter.
Yep.
All in digiscope, like a tiny spotter, digiscope, and our cameras.
Yep. And now they have lav mics that'll Bluetooth to your phone.
Yep.
So you can have good audio.
So each guy has, a lav on, it's Bluetoothing right into the camera, and you're capturing clean audio. Look, weight to performance. I'm convinced I can make an excellent. I made some before. I can make a great movie. That one with Adam Weatherby.
One of the first, the second film that I ever filmed with you and I together and stuff. Yeah. I ended up filming Adam.
And I said to Brad, I'm like, you haven't mastered these complex cameras.
We didn't have any extra.
We didn't, but even if we did, I'm like, the best camera is the camera I would rather have, I tell Ryan, just grab your phone. Film with your phone, because he'll mess it up if he has to film with this.
Yeah.
It takes time. But what you get out of this, Sony, 4K.
Well, the setup that we're running is we're running photography manual settings to capture our video.
Yeah. Look, it's not there yet, but the smartphone capabilities are getting closer and closer all the time. The one thing that it won't do yet, even with some lenses, it's getting there.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't produce the cinematic look, and when I say cinematic look, I mean when you look at your hand a foot from your face, Brad is blurry in the corner of my eye as I'm staring at my hand here. Everything behind it is blurry.
Yeah.
And when I look at the wall right there, everything out of the periphery and beyond that wall is out of focus, and everything close to me is out of focus.
Yeah.
The human eye works like that. Like our eyes focus on what it is we're looking at. Everything else becomes blurry in the foreground and the background, right? That feels natural. That's why we like it when we watch it in a movie. When we're watching a movie and the subject is in focus, but everything behind the subject is blurry and everything in front of the subject is blurry, we're drawn to it. It's more depth. It's more authentic. It feels more real. When you're looking at a GoPro or iPhone footage, everything's in focus through affinity. So I'm looking at you, but behind you, the house, the fence, the mountain, it's all equally in focus. Right. Yep. Everything's exactly the same. It's flat. And when we look at that, we're like, do I look at Brad or do I look at the house or do I look at the mountain? Like the viewer doesn't know where to look. The cinematographer didn't really tell them by focus, look here. Yeah. That's what the focus does. It says, look right here. Yep. This is where your eye belongs. Right. And it can go from one guy being in focus while he talks to the next guy behind him in focus while he talks, and back and forth if a guy's good with his camera and knows how to do that. And it feels supernatural because your eye naturally stops looking at the guy who's not talking, not only because he quit talking.
Right. But the focus took you to the other person. And then when you're looking at that person and you're listening to them, you're not distracted by the other guy because he's blurry. Yep. You're kind of not. Now, if both are in focus and they're 10 feet apart, you kind of look back at the other guy a lot because he's in focus. Yep. You know? So it's just a powerful tool. It's much like the audio, though. People that don't know why they like a movie, they just like it. It's often because of that cinematic feature. Audio. Yep. The audio and the cinematic feature. Yep, for sure. And the iPhone, the GoPro, the 360s, those don't offer that option. You need these kind of Sony cameras with these expensive lenses or Canon or whatever to produce that. Yep. So they have new lenses, though, that you can put on the back of an iPhone and to help increase your cinematic
to give you that blur. That sort of focus option. I haven't played with them. I have looked at just recently. There's a few companies came up with some that actually work. So anyway, that I think is the future in many ways for most people, because I think a guy can master how to film with his phone and like an all-in digiscope and a spotter pretty quick, and the audio's clean, the video's everything about it's just easier.
And it's easy on my back.
It's light. So I can see it going there, and we're going to be working on those kinds of films down the road. But it's awful hard to abandon the skill set and the gear and the tools that we've hard won so far. And in the end, it is a different look. You can't deny that the color grading, the quality, and the way that these cameras are capturing, they're more dynamic. The footage is much different. Yes. Deep down, it's a higher quality.
It has a feel to it.
But if you're just telling your hunt story, you got to admit, the phone can do a dang good job.
Yes, it can. Absolutely.
So speaking of stabilization, like in the phone, it's sort of built in. We all walk around with our phones and we're like, la, 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 and it's digital. These cameras don't have the best. When you're running the mirrorless or a DSLR type camera, they're better than they used to be. Yeah, 1,000%.
For
but
sure.
You wouldn't want to like follow Brad. It's not smooth. Yep. Especially as you're trying to get these sweeping shots and like almost like a drone is just hovering or flying next to you or Ryan as you're coming down a hill. That's hard to get without a gimbal. Yep. So as much as we hate it,
I know.
As much as we can't stand it, this little tool right here, which is the Ronin.
That's the RS2.
RS2, the DJI Ronin RS2.
Now they have the newer model of this that self-locks up and has some other features, but we haven't gone that route yet.
I haven't bought it. This one's still, they're very similar. Yep. But we have the RSC2, the compact version, which we need to just sell. That's fine for a lightweight camera, but when we're running the heavier lens, like this setup right here is just what it does is it's supposed to have twice the battery life as like this thing does.
With such a heavy camera and setup, it runs out twice as fast.
It does. And this one has a replaceable battery too, so if we ever, but we can run this Ronin for a 10-day hunt, all day, like every day almost. And it might take 7 days to run this battery down.
Yep.
Or more. Sometimes 10 days of like heavy use. So it's really tough we don't really bring a charger to or a backup battery for this.
Right.
But we might have one at a base camp. Let's say we land on a lake in Alaska and we got our main setup. We'll bring two battery batteries, and we'll use this. I might swap it out, as that other one starts to die. But if I'm just backpacking in, we'll bring one. And if we get desperate and we want some more shots with it, we'll plug it in.
We got the solar panel, the battery packs.
Yep. So we run this gimbal. When you're making a movie, I can't understate the value of motion footage. It makes you feel like you're there. To just be hovering along behind a guy climbing a hill, and it's smooth, and you don't have to do a lot of editing around it. You just let it run. When you handhold it, which I've done for years and I still do, I just did it at an archer shoot this week. I'll take the camera like this and I'll just handhold it, walk around with it. If you do that, you need an 18 millimeter lens. I think 18 is perfect. I think anything more than that, less than that, it can be tricky. 18 is sort of that magic
Anything
lens.
less, you really get a fisheye look, and then anything more, it's too close and too not stable enough.
But it's pretty, you can get away with no gimbal using an 18 millimeter Batis. We use the Batis 1.8, 2.8, 18 millimeter lens. I'll follow along behind Brad, or I'll handhold it and walk behind somebody, and it's pretty good. It's tolerable. It doesn't have the cinematic sweeping feel as a gimbal does, but it's good. It'll do. If you don't want to backpack in, and if you're going someplace, like sometimes we opt to leave this behind because it just isn't conducive to the sort of remote hunting we're doing. But man, if we are not packing in far, and even sometimes nowadays, even if we are, but there's two of us,
we for sure bring it.
We bring it. It just is too powerful. The sort of cool shots you can get, like around stuff and going up hills and down and going through the brush with Brady. I can put it above my head and get him walking down the river. I can put it, up through the trees. And
again, it's just so much more usable footage that you don't have to spend the time editing. On the computer.
Look, 18 millimeters is wide. It's a wide angle. It's what we're filming this podcast with. And if we... And it's great for vlogging myself and to follow up real close behind somebody. If Ryan gets 10 feet ahead of me, that 18 is kind of useless. He's kind of a little dot up there.
And it makes everything, because the distance makes everything kind of feel in focus, kind of like the iPhone.
And so it loses its cinematic feel. It loses a lot of its charm, right? And so what you end up doing, what I end up doing with that is try to film really close to his feet, his face, the side of him, get really up over his shoulder. It's real tight filming, nothing too far away. And then I'll swap to like this 24 millimeter lens that's on here, or I'll swap to a 28. A 17 to 28.
So I run a lot for photo because I just like
75.
It's a 28 to 75, a Thermarest 28 to 75, and we can run that on the gimbal because it's a 2.8 aperture, and so we can run that on the gimbal and usually set it around that 20, about 30, probably 32 to upwards of 50 on the zoom, but it's still kind of a pain. Like
it's a giant lens, too heavy. The telephoto lens on the gimbal,
because
sticking
it's an
out,
external zoom as well, so it affects the weight on the gimbal when you zoom in and
that's
out.
not what I was going to say. Is if I'm running an 18 millimeter and I didn't bring a gimbal, I'm going to be up close. Boom, 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 boom. Then I'm going to mix it up with shots with a telephoto from the guy being further up the hill. And I'm going to stand stationary, and I'm going to give shots of him walking by or walking or climbing up or doing other things. So then I'll mix those two together. And there will be a little bit of 18 millimeter just carrying it behind him or below him or whatever to get those type of shots. I won't waste my time getting more distant shots out of the 18 millimeter, I just turn the camera off.
Yeah.
You know, I'll get all the ones I can get, like, especially if it's slow motion, exposed right. It's interesting to look at.
Right.
I'm going to bring you along through this hike in the woods or up this hill with the 18 by getting you in up close and using the lens, all the strengths of the lens.
Right.
I'm not going to go against what the lens can really do. I have to compromise because what I really want is a lot of bokeh, a lot of richness, a lot of blur. So as you're climbing the hill or you're shooting your bow, you're like tack sharp, but everything behind you is blurred out.
Right.
I want to get that in motion. So we have found to do that, an 18's too wide, and it also isn't fast enough to be 2.8.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have on a gimbal, ideally, what we're finding is, you know, if I could get a 20 or an 18, even an 18 millimeter that was 1.4, even then it's too far away. Because when you get far from a subject, if you don't know, the further you are from a subject, the less blur you can get out of your lens. Mm-hmm. The closer you get to the subject, the more you can enact that cinematic look, that blurry look that we're looking for.
And when we talk about a faster lens, it means the lower number in the aperture. So like a 1.4, a 2.8. So a 2.8 is not as fast as a 1.4.
Yeah. So when I'm filming in Kodiak Island and I've got Adam Weatherby and I'm filming over his shoulder through the woods and I have the 18 millimeter on there at 1.8, it's super wide and he's 5-6 feet away. Everything's in focus. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good.
Right.
As you watch that footage back, it's kind of flat. Everything's sort of not popping. Your eyes kind of everywhere. It doesn't have the same richness and depth. When I'm walking, I'm just naturally following Adam. There's no stage shots. Mm-hmm. I just try to capture what's happening in the moment.
Right, exactly.
And so I'm dodging trees and grass and bushes, and I've got it on the gimbal, and I'm floating by him and getting those shots. But what you run into is everything's in focus. Even the tree that's in front is in focus, just as focused as he is.
Yeah.
That's a different feel than when the tree's completely blurry because the focus is locked on Adam and everything behind him is blurry. Now you're locked onto the subject like you would a Hollywood film. Mm-hmm. Your eye likes it. And you're following him through, and it feels much more rich and deep and more authentic as you watch the film. There's more mystery being unfolded for you around every turn. Because as you're looking at him, you're like, I can't see what's behind him. Yep. And then you can reveal through focus more of that picture. In order to get that, we realized you got to run like a 1.4 millimeter lens, a fast lens, which is what we have here. This is a Sony G Series 1.4.
Yep, 24 millimeter, 1.4 aperture.
24 millimeter. So it doesn't have a long, it's a prime. Mm-hmm. There is no zoom on this. Just like our 18, there's no zoom.
No zoom.
It's just a prime. We mount that on the gimbal, and boom, we're running at 1.4 often. 2.0, like we're running it really wide open, the aperture, which gives us maximum blur potential. Mm-hmm. And when now on the gimbal, we can do like a follow focus through this, click on Brad's shoulder or his eyeball, and it just tracks Brad as he's walking along, and everything else is kind of blurred out except for him. And the further I get from the subject, the faster I need the lens to be in order to evoke that blurry bokeh look. Mm-hmm. So I like it. This has been a money lens. It's really, I think, improved the look and feel of our gimbal footage.
Yep. And before we bought this 24, we were like, you know what? We have this. We had a 55 millimeter, a Zeiss 55 millimeter. That's a 1.8 aperture. But the problem there is then you got to get super far back, and it causes another problem.
You're too far from the subject.
Correct.
In order to get them to fit in the frame because it's zoomed in too far.
Yep. So you get too much interference with trees and grass and stuff between you and that subject. Just too much to play with.
So this 24 1.4 got me the fast lens with a good focal length. I would rather it be a little wider.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get a lens at 1.4 at that width that go on a full frame that fit all of our other needs. So that's what I've got on here. 1.4, 24 millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing that I need to discuss is when we're running this lens here and when we're running the 18 millimeter lens, we're running a filter.
Yeah.
An ND filter.
Yep. I can grab one right here.
There's one right here that's scratched.
Oh, yeah.
You scratched it.
I know.
Every lens that has a scratch, it's Brad's
Negative
fault.
Ghost Rider.
That's the way it goes. So I don't know if you guys can see. There's a little scratch on there. Probably. Yep. I can keep it back here too.
Yep.
So anyway, this little filter is like a pair of sunglasses. Okay.
Yep.
And I'll put this little filter on there, and it's like a pair of sunglasses. It'll go right on top, screw onto the lens here. And the reason that we run that is to prevent too much light from it coming into the lens and overexposing our video. So, like we were saying earlier, to get the cinematic look we want, we got to keep the aperture wide open, which means you got to have a fast lens. Like I said, 1.4. There's an iris inside the lens,
like an eyeball,
a mechanical iris that opens and closes. The more open it is, the lower the number on your f-stop. So 1.4 is really open, and it also lets in gobs of light, so much light that everything's just white. So you have to find a way to shrink that light down so you can get both the blur that you're looking for and at the same time not have it overexposed.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's where the little sunglasses come into play. Throw that little filter on the front, and you're blocking the light with this mechanical device.
Yep.
And I'm allowed to just keep running the camera.
Now, there are variable filters out there, but we end up not running a variable for a couple of reasons.
Yep.
One, especially like archery, when you have a variable lens, you can't have the lens hood on, which kind of helps deflect or stop glare coming onto your lens, so an animal seeing it as the sun hits it. So again, the variable lens won't allow you to have the hood on, but also that variable lens, it can get bumped so easy that all of a sudden you have a 3-stop and then you bumped it and now you're at like a 6 or 7-stop, and so it gets really dark and you got to play with it a bunch.
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, Brad just named a couple.
Yep.
It's run and gun. We're hunting.
Yep.
I don't want to mess with my equipment, and I want things to be as auto kind of as possible at times.
Yep.
The variable ND filter, like Brad said, you can't put a hood on it. And I don't like that. I don't like not having a hood. Pedro runs his with a variable, and there's a little thing, and he just turns it, and he gains exposure constantly by turning his filter back and forth, and he's looking at the picture to see if he likes the exposure.
Yep.
I hate that. Generally, what I do is internally, I set the ISO to auto, and it auto exposes based on the filter.
Yeah, and we set a base auto and a maximum. So it can't go above that, can't go below.
Yeah, minimum ISO, maximum ISO, which is basically when I set it on the auto, I can set the range that I want it to go. And what that does is if it's too dark, the camera just compensates.
Yeah.
If it's too light, I sort of have to change a setting.
Yeah,
basically.
Correct.
So I prefer to run. The other thing with variables is they often have like X's through the middle of them, or you can see in post, especially if you color it. It can be you can see like you can see the lenses actually, like the sunglasses sort of look.
You have a little darker sunglass here and a little lighter one here.
I hate variable ND filters.
Yep.
So I run a 3-stop and a 6-stop. I've bought one for every camera I own. I like the Breakthrough. That brand, 3-stop, 6-stop, Breakthrough seems to give me, because when you run a pair of sunglasses on the front, an ND filter, you can it can have a blue tint, purple tint, yellow tint, brown tint. Like they all have a little tint.
Yep.
I just feel like the Breakthrough filters, I like the colors, the tint that it offers, that it comes in.
Yeah.
And it allows me to, I feel like, get the most natural white balance, so that when I edit and post all my outdoor footage, it just cleans up, and I can apply all my LUTs, lookup tables, and all my color schemes to it. So I prefer a 3-stop in the morning and in the evening, as the sun is just kind of getting a little brighter, or it's getting a little later, and I just let the ISO overpower. That's why I like the A7S III. I can just let that ISO go. And so when this is too dark, this 3-stop is a little too dark, the camera just compensates with a higher ISO without it being grainy.
Right. And it's perfect, which is like the optimal filming setting when you have a good cloudy day with some sunlight, but it's not bright. The 3-stop is perfect. Money. It's so good.
When it gets bright, and it's just harsh light.
Yep.
We go drastic. We pull in the 6-stop. It doubles the thickness or the tint on the sunglasses here. We'll put the 6-stop on. Same thing. Auto ISO.
Yeah.
And I'm just running it so that I'm trying to get my exposure how I like. And it needs to be pretty bright to run.
Yeah.
There's
only a few places that we know, like, okay, got to run the 6-stop. And it's those really bright desert, some of that stuff.
I found that you can get a meter on the back, an exposure reading that says, okay, it's underexposed, like 0.3 or 0.7, which is the goal for me when I'm looking for exposure values on footage I'm capturing. But I found that when I get home, if it's just got too much tint, it's just got too much tint.
Yeah.
If the ND filter's too powerful, everything's sort of gray and blue, and I don't like the footage.
Yep.
So I'll give up some of the bokeh and the blur, and I'll run the 3-stop, and I'll just raise the aperture up to 4 or 5, and I'll just, that way I'm getting a better look with less blur. I'm sacrificing,
and then some of that stuff we try and get a little closer to the subject to create that
better cinematic look.
Yep,
better bokeh. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the idea behind, how we kind of capture it. With some people that are, like, if you're a photographer and you're familiar with all the things we're talking about, for those that don't, you probably tuned out already. But for those that are still here, when you're running a video camera, a mirrorless Sony camera like this, you have to run. The reason, so photographers don't need filters generally because they're able to just change their shutter speed.
Yep. Raise the shutter speed, and then it will close down. You get a darker image without sacrificing the bokeh.
Yeah, you can just keep the all the settings you want, and if you want to allow less light, you just
and there are times, like, if you have a really good filter, there are times, like, when it's really bright, I will shoot with a filter on, because it does allow you.
It helps you with the other two settings the way you want.
Yep.
Let's say you want to, get a little more on a fish that you pull out of the water, and you want that drip to be down. Well, you need a slower shutter speed.
Yeah.
But if you do that, but you still want the blur and you still want the ISO all the way down, the only way to get that look is with an external ND filter.
Exactly.
That I know of.
Yep.
So you throw that thing on there, and now you can start messing around with that. It's like those guys that take pictures of waterfalls and they're trying to blur the water. They're generally using an ND filter to achieve that. Anyway, shutter speed you can mess with. In film, you can't. You've got to set it to 2 times the frame rate.
Yep.
So if you're filming at 24 frames per second, you got to set the shutter speed to
50. 1/50. Yep.
1/50th. If you're doing, so it's another thing that we'll do is we often record at 60 frames per second with the 3-stop filter. And that means your shutter speed can be,
it's got to stay at 1/25.
1/25. And that blocks a lot of that light. Hey, if you like our show and you want to support us, head over to Peaks Equipment and check out what they have. Use the code GRIDDY over there and you will save. They've got the trekking poles. They've got their sleeping bag that they just dropped. Peaks has a teepee. They have gaiters. They have a headlamp. All premium products for the outdoorsman. Head over there. Use the code GRIDDY. That's peaksequipment.com. Now let's get back to the show. Because of film, you'll get ghosting or other weird issues if you go below or above 2 times the frame rate. Mm-hmm. We don't want any of that. So if you're going to reduce light that's coming into the camera, greatly try to reduce it. That's why you got to use the ND filter for that. Yep. In a pinch, I've left an ND filter and then I've just dealt with the ghosting.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter if you're not moving too much.
Yeah.
You get a great actual looking shot. It's a little clippy and there's some weird things about it. But most people can't tell, and they prefer the blur and the exposure value that they're getting to the fact that it's ghosting.
Yeah. Yep.
In fact, for a couple of years, when I ran my Canon, I didn't even use ND filters. Yeah. I just did that.
And I know a lot of guys that don't run ND filters, but I just like the look of the film better when you have that control.
Well, I feel like it's much more. So we'll run the 3-stop, like I said, and then we'll switch to the 6-stop deep into the day. When we're in the shadows or the timber, we'll take it off, maybe go back to the 3-stop. We're constantly unscrewing and screwing on that 3 and 6-stop based on
they're always readily available
on the hip.
On the hip in the pocket.
They'll change throughout the day. I prefer that to the variable, which is like all the stops and you got to dial it. You got to get rid of your hood. I just don't like any of that hassle.
Yep.
So I like the camera to be auto like that.
Yep.
So anyway, I hope that makes some sense to you guys.
Yep. We've got
that.
Went over our long range stuff. We went over kind of our close setup with 18 millimeter, 24 millimeter. And now probably lastly is going to be
18 is the handheld.
Yes.
No gimbal.
Yep.
The 24 is if you've got a gimbal.
Yep.
All fast lenses, 1.4, 2.8, 1.8, all in that range. Long range lens, you're just going to get what you get. 2 to 600.
Right.
Aperture isn't really, or 1 to 400 with a teleconverter.
Yep.
The final lens.
This is our run and gun, especially for like an archery hunt. I would say most of the films that are archery hunts, the most time we use this is an archery hunt over the shoulder. This is the Sony 24 to 240. Where the downside of this lens is, it's not a very fast lens. And as you adjust that zoom out, you get a higher aperture, so it actually is less blur. So you got 3.5 to 6.3 on this, 24 to 240.
But if you run this lens with a filter on it, which we do, we put a filter on it.
Yep.
And you're zoomed all the way out, close to a subject.
That 6.3 looks pretty good.
It all looks good.
Yep.
To make this lens look good, you need to be zoomed out. To give it blur, you just got to zoom out with it a long way.
Yeah.
Or be super close to your subject. I mean, in essence, it's the same principle.
Exactly.
Close to your subject will give you the blur.
Yeah, what you're doing
whether you use your feet on the low end of the lens or you zoom out to the very end of the top end of the lens to somebody and you're like filling them up in the frame, you can get cinematic looks out of this lens. You just got to know its limitations.
Yep. And if you are a video...
But you got to have the filter.
You have to have the filter. But if you are a video guy and you're doing photos, this lens is great. Like, I actually love taking photos with this lens because it gives me a lot of reach, so I can get close to that subject through the zoom of the lens, and then I can create the bokeh that way. And it's crisp. It works great, especially with something like the R4, where I just have so much croppability and stuff. That megapixel makes for great photos.
If it's a bow hunt, this is it. This is the lens.
Yep.
We're just going to run it constantly.
Yep. Like, we're together. A lot of times, one will be running the 18 millimeter because we can just easily vlog and stuff with that. But the 24 is like where the stalking moment is coming in over the shoulder, get the animal, get the guy close. It's very versatile.
Honestly, when it comes to a kill shot, heat of the moment, I don't care if there's bokeh or blur a lot of times. Yep. That will kind of hurt you, actually. You'll see guys kind of trying to, they'll run with too wide, too open of an aperture.
Yep.
And the animal's in and out of focus right in the key moment. They're blurry when the guy shoots it with an arrow. It's trickier. That's why, a lot of times I'll just raise the f-stop up to f11, f15. Like I'll jack it all the way up so that everything's in focus. That way I don't have to chase focus when that deer comes walking in and I'm filming over the guy's shoulder. Because the worst thing that can happen is he's totally out of focus.
Yep.
So I'll change that. Now, I prefer that cinematic look.
Yeah.
And when I'm feeling ballsy and I feel like I have the luxury, I'll do everything I can to get that apertures wide open and then keep that animal in focus. But the conditions have to be those kinds of conditions. Yeah. I have to sense that it's a gamble going that way. And you can split the difference, by just kind of figuring that depth of field that's ideal.
Yeah.
And that's an over the shoulder challenge with this stuff. You'll see guys mess up that kill shot moment, archery, especially over the shoulder, close range interactions, things coming in and out of focus. It's a nightmare. The other thing too is the manual versus auto. I lean heavy on manual. I just keep working on my manual focus skills, getting better and better and better at them. Playing around with that, switching in and out pretty quick.
Yep.
But there's no substitute for really talented and quick manual focus capabilities. They just surpass what the auto can do when you're filming in the wild, because there's trees and bushes and sticks and everything between you and what you actually want to see.
Exactly.
And so it takes some skill to get to do that. So this lens though is the perfect run and gun, photography, everything.
Yep.
It can do an entire hunt, just this lens. You could easily crop and post a 4K long distance shot. It's beautiful. I've done it a lot. We could film all of our hunts with only this lens.
Yep.
It wouldn't have as much bokeh, wouldn't have as much depth of field. It wouldn't be as stable.
And it wouldn't have as good a long range footage because it's still too far.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as... It depends on how close you are.
Right. Exactly.
If you're 150 yards from it, that's one thing. If you're 700 yards from it,
exactly.
But we still have done it.
Yes, for sure.
It looks like a lot of our peers' footage instead of the type I like to create, because we're packing this while they're packing this. That's one of the issues. But yeah, this lens right here, love it.
Yep.
So
I think lastly, we can touch on a couple tripods real fast. Just kind of what we have used. So like archery spot and stock. This is the Gitzo. I actually don't even know which Gitzo it is.
Before you go there,
yeah,
I wanted to touch on one thing, because when I was talking about the manual focus, there's an issue that really matters. You're using focus peaking.
Oh yeah,
in the camera,
right?
So we set our cameras to have like a red.
Yeah.
Is it red? We don't go white or yellow.
We used to have yellow. I hated the yellow. I like red.
Red. What it does is everything that's in focus gets a red.
You get a bunch of red dots on it.
Yeah. And so you can see using the camera, looking through the camera lens, you can be like, oh, that's in focus. And you can use focus peaking to check and see if what you think is in focus is really in focus.
Yep.
In a run and gun situation, it works really well. You can also, when you change the aperture, you can tell, like, let's say you're filming 100 yards and your subject is at the 50-yard mark, right? And you're saying to the camera, hey, the depth of field needs to be 6 feet wide, right? So between you and this 100-yard space, an animal is 50 yards out, and you have a 5-foot focus area. That means the only thing that's in focus is a 5-foot distance, like right where the animal's standing at 50 yards.
Right.
So maybe a couple feet before the animal, a couple feet after the animal is in focus. Everything else beyond that for that 100 yards and before that is out of focus.
Yeah, so what you'll see is you'll just see this like perfect line in front and behind the animal of red, and it's showing that it's in focus.
And if you dial the barrel, and you can slide that line back and forth up your 100-yard distance, to put whatever's in there in that 5-foot window. But that's the thing we're talking about. If you change that 5-foot window to a 70-foot window, now everything almost between that and that 100-yard window is in focus. Now you don't have to chase the focus. If the animal runs forward, backward, does anything, they just stay in everything that's in focus because you set that depth of field so wide. You get rid of the cinematic look, but you still have the animal focus, which is way more important than it being cinematic.
Right, exactly. So
that means the viewfinder is critical. And this is what I wanted to get into. Every camera we use has this, has a lens hood mounted to it.
Yeah, it's an aftermarket.
I think this is
eyepiece.
What's it called? Like, you can go to B&H Photo.
You just find the eyepiece that works for your camera, and it's an additional rubber eyepiece because it's like
hoodie.
Yep,
or it's called or something like that. I don't remember. But this little eyepiece, replace the one that's there, and you put this one on.
Yep.
And when you get this thing,
so it'll actually cup around your eye socket, so it blocks out all the light, and you
can't see it, dude. Like on the stock, you bright sunny day, you're having a hard time seeing what the heck is happening.
Yep.
The lens hood, this little rubber lens hood,
eyepiece
saves your butt. And when I'm filming, even when I'm on the gimbal and stuff like that, I got my eye in there constantly.
Yep.
Two things that I do all the time that I've become quite skilled at is I'm monitoring my audio with a pair of lousy headphones. I would like another way of doing it, like wirelessly, but I don't have that. And the other thing is I'm using the viewfinder constantly. And I find that if guys that do that capture great audio and great video, guys who don't look through the viewfinder often just use the screen on the back, you can't tell. Yep. Especially on a bright day. You don't know what the hell's going on. You don't know if your subject is in focus, out of focus. You don't know if you like the framing of the shot. You don't know if you like the exposure. You gotta pay your dues. You gotta put in the hours looking through the friggin' viewfinder. And if you do the same thing with the audio and you're just diligent about listening to it, you just know, okay, you're quality checking it in the moment.
Yep.
And that is critical. That's how you get better. The other thing too, and I've said this to Brad, and I want Brad to do it more, is when I get back to camp at night, I pretty much watch what I did that day and I listen to it.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is to see what I did right and what I did wrong that day, and to make sure that I don't have some weird setting going on that I didn't know about, that I record the whole week on and miss.
Yeah.
So that's where watching your footage, you're like, you know what? I didn't like that. Or it's a refresher, like a audit I'm doing on what I did that day. It takes 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and I watch it. I listen to it. I'm like, okay. Well, got it. And I can then adapt the next day.
Yeah.
And each day I'm out there, I'm getting a little sharper and a little sharper with my film, my filming.
Yep.
Tripods.
We were on the Gitzo. I think they're the Travelers. One's a Traveler. This one's a little smaller. This is like our over-the-shoulder spot and stock archery one. Super lightweight. We'll put a strap on here, and that way you have the tripod on it, and then you get calling on your butt. You can sit your camera on here. Don't have a head on this one, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
We use that one quite a bit. Then we have the next size up Gitzo, and then we have
now we're sort of the Gitzo. The reason I went with the Gitzo is
the base stance.
They had a wide stance.
Yep.
And so the Gitzo, they're just more stable.
Yep.
For weight. And I have used a million tripods. Not a million. I've used
dozens.
Hyperbolically. I've used a million. I've used a lot and tried them all. And there was a marked difference in the quality of the footage I was getting out of a Gitzo versus the other tripods.
Yeah.
Just in terms of dealing with the shake. So in the wind.
Especially on the long lens footage.
Yep. I'm filming a long way. That's really where I need the tripod to be stable. This lens is heavy. You throw that body on it too, and you do this, and it's on a narrow stance tripod, and the wind is blowing. It's almost useless footage.
Top heavy.
So that's where it's become critical that the tripod is excellent. With that, I don't want it to weigh too much either. I hate carrying a tripod. So the Gitzo has been money. They're expensive, but they're still just, a solid design like everybody else's.
Yep.
So Brad and Ryan started running the Tricer tripod, and they were using the 80 and the BC.
Yep.
And those two tripods, one is taller than the other, essentially. Both are super light and really nice.
Yep. I
mean, their weight is incredibly light.
Yeah, for the backcountry guy, especially even a big spotter glassing with binoculars, like they're so lightweight. And like myself, I'm sitting glassing most of the time. So like the BC is probably what I would use 90% of the time because I don't stand in glass, and it's sub 2 pounds with a head on it that works really well.
You love it.
I love it. Yep.
It doesn't work for filming.
No, it does not.
But it's great for glassing.
Glassing, putting the spotter on, the binoculars,
and a small camera and a small lens and all that, just to take photos, kill shots, and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Or trophy shots. So I brought the feedback back to Drew, who is the owner of Tricer, and I was like, I need that wider stance. I need to kick out those legs, and there's a stability factor when the legs have a little bit different angle, more like a pyramid on a, when you get that sort of angle down, you end up with a much more stable platform than when you have a tall and narrow. Now, the reason most of them do the tall and narrow is because you're getting all that height and it weighs less. Yep. And you don't need it when you're just running a spotter and binos.
Exactly.
But when you're running a heavy camera setup and what you're filming, you need to be not have a lot of shake and be very stable. I needed a wider platform. Now, a heavy tripod
will solve all the problems. But I don't like packing
But I don't want to carry this massive heavy tripod.
Yep.
So what I asked for was, okay, can you get me a tripod? I also need a tall one because when I'm filming, dude, sometimes I have to film over the shooter's back or I have to film over brush. There's a moose coming. I need a tripod that's tall enough. And I never know when that's going to be.
Yep.
I can't afford to try to set up this heavy lens on a BC or an AD tripod. It's not enough. Yep. I need for filming. I need more. I need some height when I need it.
Yep.
So Tricer did. They came out with the JC.
Yep.
It gave me the stance I wanted and the height I wanted, and yet the weight I wanted.
Yes.
So it is now, like when you compare it to the Gitzo, which is what we're filming with right now. So I have it in my hand. This Tricer is just lighter and does the same thing. And it's got, now that I'm using the Tricer heads, there's a few heads that are prototypes.
So like one big thing with this JC tripod is it's built into the tripod. You actually have micro adjustment versus like just say this gets a tripod here. You undo this and you pull it up or down or whatever. On that, you can micro adjust the left and right, the up and down through a knob. And so it works really well. It's built right into the tripod.
So normally you need a nice fluid head in order to pan your shot left and right and so on.
Yep.
And as you move it, you need a fluid head. They're heavy. The best ones are heavy. They have a lot of resistance in the head. So as you push them forward, push them back, they're trying to spring against you. And you get this resistance that creates this buttery smooth pan.
Yep.
It comes at a heavy weight. It's a cost. Well, Tricer, they're genius. Drew's genius. What he did is he came up with a tripod head with a ball joint in it that I can level. So if my tripod is tilted on the side and I'm in a hurry, I can just
level it with the
ball head. Yep. Boom. I don't have to kick the legs out. Like instantly I have a fairly level tripod. If I'm shooting with a rifle with it, it's done. The ball head solves a million problems in a few seconds.
Yep.
Right. And I can get that set up, but I can also
pan left and right with a
knob.
Yep.
So now I can turn this knob right here and it is smoother than it's almost like an electric button.
Yeah.
Where you just hold it and the camera just moves to the right or to the left.
Right.
You just like, and it just like pans. And when you're zoomed out 600 millimeters and you're going 1.4 teleconverter on top of that, and you're doing like clear image zoom and you're popped out there a long way.
Yep.
Like it doesn't take much rotation in the head to give you a big pan.
Right.
And will be following the animal now, and I can turn the dial. I can turn this dial right here.
Built into the tripod.
Built into the tripod. It's turning the neck of the tripod in a panning after the animal. When you're glassing, same thing. You don't have to like jerk out of the way. Let's say the animal moved like 10 feet, 20 feet to the right and up the little hill. You just dial the knobs and you just like, the tripod just moves and raises.
Follow it without having like
I don't have to adjust the fluid head at all. Leave it alone.
Yep.
I can just use that. And dude, playing around with it, it's special.
Yes.
It's special. It's like, wow, that is a innovative game change. I'm impressed.
Yep. And the big thing with the JC, so it's actually not even out yet. The JC tripod, you can pre-order it now. But with the JC, it'll come with metal weights. So this is a perfect tripod for those hunts that we're not backpacking a ton, especially because then we can add weight to it.
It's got steel rods that screw into the bottom and into the neck and just make the whole thing like 7 pounds.
So you can take them all out and you got a 3-pound tripod. You put all the weight in there, you got a 7-pound tripod. You can adjust them. You can put a weight.
And let me tell you, when I'm in the side by side and I'm cruising around and we're in Mexico and we're getting out and we're glassing, I'm bringing that 7-pound. I'm putting the weights in.
Yep.
I mean, just boom, lock it down. The wind can be blowing. It ain't going to move.
Perfect hunts are like your antelope hunts that you know you're hunting from a truck almost all the time or a side-by-side. Put that weight in there. It's super windy on the desert always. And you've eliminated a lot of that shake because you have such a heavy tripod. And you're not packing 10 days worth of food and camera gear and all that.
The other thing, too, is on the 2 to 600 or the 1 to 400, you want to replace this foot that comes with the Sony with an aftermarket one.
Yeah.
Preferably with an Arca Swiss rail like this one, because I can slide this thing onto my head like this.
It might be adjusted for a smaller.
It is.
Yep.
But you can slide it on and it's direct. There's no plate. So I don't need to put a plate on this.
On the tripod head.
No.
Or sorry, on the foot.
The foot.
Yep.
Because you typically put this down, the foot on the Sony big lens, then you put your plate, your Arca Swiss plate on top of that. And now if you turn or whatever, you have a failure point that could twist off. Also, it just seems to be way less stable.
Yeah.
Like this is super rigid, these aftermarket foots. So then when I put it on here like so, and I clip her in, dude, the thing is so rock solid.
Yep.
And that took a lot of the shake out of my camera lens. The other thing too is on this foot right here, there's 4 little screws on the Sony lens that receives this foot. And this is in KES or KCS or foot, I don't know. But you want to Loctite those screws.
Yep.
Get yourself some of that like super glue Loctite.
Yeah. You can do blue. Don't do red because you don't want to heat it up.
And you Loctite those screws in.
Yep.
Because you'll get a little shake right in here. You'll get this looseness. The other thing is like just go around your lens and screw in all those screws with Loctite and get them locked down so that you don't have any shake or wiggle in the lens and you don't end up on the mountain with an issue, which we've done in the past.
Yep.
So Loctite all those little screws that come on the Sony lens.
Do the same thing to all my camera lenses and stuff as I do my rifles. It all gets Loctited down.
So if you're going to do a Tricer tripod, by the way, Drew loves us and we love him. And he's got the code GRIDDY over there.
Yep.
So you'll save if you use the code GRIDDY. Look, Drew has been making stuff for us for years. And I haven't promoted it much because I didn't feel like I had what I needed to be honest about that I would actually use it. I'm like, I don't have something better. And he has finally won me over completely. Now, he's won a ton of hunters over, But I don't know that you want a lot of camera guys over.
Right.
And I'm telling you now, and with this locking head, I mean, I just freaking, I can't believe the cool head like this. I still think I want a fishing pole crank right here. Now, he says I'll get better at it and used to it and stuff, but I don't know if he's filmed before.
Yeah. I just want to start carrying a little motor that clicks onto there and
I do
push it right and left.
If I could just
my panning.
flip a motor like we do with the gimbal.
Yep.
Like just, it just like moves at a constant
I'll
rate.
figure something out. They got those little motors that don't take much power.
I think he should figure it out. Put it on there and give me a little button and I'll like nail it. I'll be like, up and down.
Exactly.
Come on, Drew.
I used to work with a lot of connects back in the day when I was a kid. So I had those little motors that would turn the wheels and pulleys.
Yeah.
So I might steal some of those.
I mean, you can set the drag here for raising it up like so, moving it left and right.
Yep.
And that's without using the pan head at all.
Right.
And you can use the pan head, but, you know, they're a little jerkier movements, especially with the weight. Mm-hmm. And if you loosen the tension with this kind of weight,
drops.
So then you have to carry in this 5-pound fluid head,
which is on that.
which is what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Now I can bring this lightweight version, still accomplish my panning and all of that I want.
Yep.
Like so.
Exactly.
And up and down without having to compromise, you know? So the tilt is actually fairly smooth.
Yeah, setting the drag, like he has those big 2-inch bearings in there, or 1.5 inches, whatever they are.
They're brakes.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
the other
essentially
thing.
like a brake.
That's the other thing is when I lower this, every head I've ever owned, even those with the heavy, even with the big, anyone we choose to backpack with,
right? And
it's fairly robust. Even when you lock that head, that fluid head, it still drops like 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch every single time.
Right.
This head right here that Drew put together, once you let go of it,
it stays.
It stays exactly where you put it because these are essentially big brake pads in there.
Yep.
And the resistance is just about right for what I'm looking for. And I'm getting that. And once you set those, you don't really change it. You don't need to.
No.
But this right here, that's the money shot right there. Being able to move that around, move the head up and down, follow your subject. Like, think of all those KUIU deer you have in a frame.
Right.
And you're like, I need to move it over. But you're like, man, if I barely touch it, like, whoop, you lose the target, you know? Dude, this is like, you just micro adjust right onto the animal, center it in the frame. I can leave the camera connected the whole time. I can leave that camera right on the body here. And you'll see in the footage moving forward this like smooth panning and following of the animal that looks like it's almost done in post, or it's done with a fluid head in the field that was really heavy that you had to pack in. But I'm going to get that with just using this lightweight tripod and this new head and everything. I will say, like right here, see how I'm moving it?
Yeah. I've been playing with it quite a bit.
I still think some sort of crank with more leverage would like a fishing pole one, would give you just this perfect little spin. Yeah. He said he had one on there at first and he took it off but I'd pay for the bonus handle. But anyway, check out Tricer. Use the code GRIDDY over there and you will save. If you're just looking for something for hunting, not a big heavy lens like this, the BC or the AD tripods with the LP head is pretty money.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way to go. If you want this head, this bigger tripod, Tricer JC, check that out. Yeah, and I'm excited.
Yeah, if you have like a bigger spotter, like a big BTX or something like that, you know, he does have the other head, the BP head, which is still the ball bearing like this with the resistance. It'll just handle a bigger optic better than what the smaller tripod head does, but still great.
Yep. So I hope that answers questions. I think we kind of covered all the basic sort of gear we're using, kind of hit it all. We've used a lot of other pieces of equipment it's just not in this because we've chucked it.
Yep.
We just don't use it anymore. We've kind of gone through all sorts of phases and stages, and it's kind of where we've narrowed things down. And it's personal preference because when I'm out with Pedro, completely different. I try to film all my long range footage in log, S-Log, S-Log 3. 2 is good too, but I try to run it all in S-Log 3 and overexpose it by 2 stops. And the reason I do long range footage that way, I don't really need to run S-Log for 99% of what we're doing. If it's through this long lens and the subject is really far out, S-Log is powerful because when I get home, there's so much like a raw photo. I can just pull out all these colors, all this texture, all this sharpness, all this stuff that I cannot capture in like your standard picture profiles, your standard film settings. So I really, really like S-Log 3 for filming long distance. Everything else, we don't run in that.
Nope.
We use other picture profiles that are more basic. Don't need to go into log. Log is just for long range. I have filmed entire hunts using log.
Yep.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of work.
A lot of work to film and a lot of work to edit.
And a lot of space on your memory cards. Added that is, I feel, unnecessary for the short range footage.
Yeah. So for long range, takes a little practice getting things in log. It takes a little practice because it's a different exposure value and keeping it in that window. When the sun goes down, I'm thinking ahead, slow motion, I'm getting rid of it. I got to ditch it. I got to choose between slow motion or log.
Right.
Sometimes. And I choose slow motion. So I get rid of log. I get rid of a lot of exposure values. Then later, I'll tell you this, at night, I go to 24 frames per second and no slow motion in 4K all day long. I stick to 4K is king. 4K.
Yep.
That's king. If I can get other things like a slow motion and other options, then I will. If I can keep 4K, but I almost never ever give up 4K. Yep. I would rather have the footage be crisp and bright and clear, real time, than go down to 1080 HD and have super slow motion. And the reason for that is it's long range. Everything we film long range gets cropped. It gets punched in. It gets zoomed in on to such a degree that that's just the nature of filming wildlife at a distance.
Yeah.
And there's no substitute for 4K for all of that. You just can't you can't zoom in on HD footage. So abandon the slow motion. So anyway, for some of you, this podcast was great. I hope you liked it. For some of you, you already tuned out a long time ago.
We've had a lot of questions. Oh, what's your camera setup? What's your camera setup? What's your camera setup? So
we have discussed, I've mentioned a film school, and I definitely I've put together some curriculum. I've been working on it. I even looked at making it digital through Treeline Academy, through Mark Livesey, and we've discussed a lot of this. I put together days worth of courses. I just didn't have time to launch the event like I wanted. I have too much on my plate right now between now and the fall, which is coming quickly. A month and a half we'll be hunting, 2 months. And so I just didn't have time to squeeze it in, but I'm working on it. And I hope that for those that want to, we will be doing a film school either this spring, a couple of them in the spring or early summer.
Yeah.
And it's going to be cool. I think we have a lot to offer in terms of storytelling, techniques in the field. I mean, today we pretty much covered what we use, but there's so much more to it.
Yes.
So hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a comment, as always, on our videos in the comment section. We try to respond to all those. And thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.